Hi everyone and welcome to the Empowered You podcast. I'm Chavi Israel, your host, speaking to you from Sydney, Australia. After October 7, I found myself in uncomfortable situations, not sure how to respond or navigate. That's why I created the Empowered You, first an organization and now a podcast to equip you with the knowledge, skills and tools surrounding Israel and your Jewish identity. In each episode, we'll explore various topics from multiple perspectives so that you can feel informed, empowered, and proud of who you are. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Uncle Velvel, hello, hello, hello.
It's very, very nice to be here once again in this lovely home.
Oh, thank you. And you were just in Israel, were you not?
We are contemplating making Aliyah, and we went for a simcha of my beautiful granddaughter and the Yom Tovim and everything. And now we've come back to see family. And at the end of the year, please God, we're going to make Aliyah.
Wow, unbelievable. Before we get into all of that, let's start from the very beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? Where were you born? Where were you raised? Tell us about your family so that we have a little bit of a picture of where does Uncle Velvel come from?
So my parents, who survived the war, I'm actually a child of my father's second marriage. Tragically, his whole first family perished in the war, except for one son who went to Israel. And I may have told you this story before, but for all the listeners, they're going to be flabbergasted.
Yeah.
So basically, what happened? He and the son were Auschwitz survivors, and they survived. And this son, who was called Nechama David, after the war, he met a lovely lady called Pessa, and they decided to get married. Now, this Pessa, her family had also perished in war. She only had one living sister left from everybody. And when she got married to Nechama David, he realized that his own father was by himself and nobody. And she realized her sister was with nobody.
Her older sister?
Her older sister. So they came to them and they said, listen, you've got nobody to marry. My mother, of course, did have a boyfriend, and he was killed. And they said, you've got nobody to marry. Marry my father-in-law, he'll look after you. So imagine, out of the war, a father and a son married two sisters. And I only found this out when I was about 13 years old, because I didn't understand it before. I thought it was an uncle and an aunt, when in truth, he was my half-brother, and of course she was my aunt, and they were pioneers. They went to Eretz Yisrael, and my parents wanted to follow. And then he wrote back to them, don't come because we're living in tents. So they found very far family in Australia, and they decided to come all the way to Australia. And it's mind-boggling because everything went by mail and everything. And they came to the port, which was Circular Quay, on a Shabbos, and you might have heard the story because we've done a 70th anniversary in 75th at Circular Quay. There were 350 Jewish survivors of the Holocaust on that boat. All of them went off, on Shabbos. Two couples stayed on the boat, the Starks, who were Aviva Itkin's grandparents, and my parents. They stayed on the boat, and the Starks were related to Rabbi Porosh from the Great Synagogue. He came down after Shabbos to make Havdalah for them all. And my mother said to my father, everybody else got off the boat. Why didn't we? And he said to my mother, because I wanted my first footsteps in this strange country to be according to Torah and mitzvahs.
Wow.
Yeah. So then, of course, came the time of settling in. And of course, as you can imagine, it's very difficult for my mother to have children after everything she went through. And my mother told me she went to so many doctors on Macquarie Street, and they sadly said, because of her war injuries, they said, you will never, ever have children. She never gave up, and she must have such a munah. She finally went to the Paddington Hospital, and some doctor did some procedure with her after going to many, many doctors. And my mother said to the doctor, well, when should I come back to find the results? And the doctor said to Mrs. Lederman, you'll come back when you'll be expecting your first child. And then a girl was born, and that was my older sister who lives in Melbourne. And then, amazingly, that's why I think of myself as a walking miracle, because they say they'll never be able to have children. And then I was born 2 years later, and I grew up in Sydney, in Bondi. Funnily enough, I'll jump to the future now. That's why it's very strange going to live in Israel now, because I've been very lucky. Never, ever in my life have I lived in an apartment. I know we're going to live in an apartment. But anyway, so we lived in a little house in Stewart Street, and I was very, very lucky to go to Moriah College, which is a story in itself, because my parents couldn't afford going to a Jewish school.
Were you one of the first classes at Moriah, or Moriah was already like established by the time you were?
Moriah was established already, and when Sam Fisher, the then president, whose whole family went to make Aliyah in Israel, when Sam Fisher realized that the son of the Chazan of Mizrahi Shul, because my father was the first Chazan Mizrahi, that the son was going to go to a public school, he said, you have to bring your child to Moriah College. And my mother said, we don't even drive. I won't even be able to get him there.
Oh,
you wouldn't find many presidents like this anymore. So Sam Fisher said, don't worry, I'm going to send a hire car every day to pick up those children who can't get to school. So we all went by a hire car, and it's because of him that I got a Jewish education. And he was the first one who gave me the job at Moriah. Now, what happened for high school, the high school wasn't yet properly established. Rabbi Abramson, who is the stepfather of Rabbi Gutnick, he was the rabbi who taught me Bar Mitzvah. And incidentally, I will digress for a minute. Shai Abramson, the chief cantor, the chief cousin of the Tzahal, and I'm sure you've heard, he's the great nephew, and I got to see him now.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize that.
So he's a great nephew. So Rabbi Abramson told my parents, this must have been so hard for them. He said, you can't send your boy to a school like Moriah College. He has to go to a yeshiva. Now imagine Holocaust survivors sending away their only son to Melbourne. So I got billeted with the Slonim family, the son of Slonim on Hotham Street. And I went there for 2 years, and then it was too hard for them, and I came back.
What yeshiva did you go to?
Yeshiva College. And I was so lucky because I was there in the heyday with Rabbi Grona. So he had a big influence on me.
So were you only immersed in Limudei Kodesh then, because you went to Melbourne?
So then we were very lucky. The school was properly established. It was the Masifta hadn't even yet been thought of.
So then why did you have to go all the way to Melbourne?
Yeah, because Rabbi, because there wasn't yet a proper film school
Understood.
here. Then when we came back, a whole lot of us went to Falklands High, and we went to the Cheder in the afternoon at Yeshiva. And then after finishing high school, my parents, who were very, very overprotective, they wanted me to do a commerce degree, and I didn't want to. And I was already involved quite heavily in B'nai Kiva. And I felt sorry for them because my sister got married at the beginning of 1972, sorry. And then I thought, if I go away on a hachshara with B'nai Kiva, they'll be left with nobody. So I agreed with my parents, I will do a year of commerce, and then hopefully I can go to Israel the following year. And I didn't really like the commerce degree because I knew it wasn't me, and I knew that because I had undertaken to become a madrich B'nai Kiva, I knew that chinuch, was my calling. At the end of that year, and sometimes I look back on it as, what did I do? I wasted a whole year, but you never waste it because I was still involved in chinuch and different things.
And you know why else you didn't waste it, Uncle Velvel? Because why did you do that year? You did it
to find out.
For kibbud of aim. That's what I'm thinking about.
True.
To respect your mother and your father. Do you realize how unbelievable that is?
Yeah.
Which you dedicated a whole year of your life at the peak of your life.
Yeah. And thank you for telling me that.
I'm inspired.
I'm going to walk away from this podcast thinking, look what I did for my mother and father.
But look what you did. Keep it of him.
You know what? And I have to give credit to my dear better half, Nechama Lederman. I wouldn't even be sitting here today doing this podcast with you. We would be enjoying ourselves now in New York. We were going to go for a wedding, and her sister said, "Our poor mum is alone in Sydney. Please go back and look after her." And because she said, "I'm doing this for my mother. There's nobody else, so we're going to come back." I went to Israel on a Hakshara program in 1973. It was during the Yom Kippur War, but it was a beautiful year in Kibbutz Shluchot. And there I realized I have to dedicate my life to the future kids of Sydney. And it wasn't easy because halfway through the year, I realized now I have to get into another faculty because I sort of was in commerce and I withdrew and I hadn't even done the exams. Had I done the exams, I could have continued something else. Anyway, the then dean of Shalom College, who was an Israeli called Zevamet, he helped me get into the arts faculty. And I was actually the first student in Sydney to do a double degree. So I did arts at New South Wales and Hebrew at Sydney. And then I decided to go into Jewish studies. And I was the first one also under Dr. Crown to do a diploma of education after the degree and to major in all the Jewish subjects. And one of my prize possessions, and maybe the Mariah Library still has it, at the end of diploma of education, instead of doing like a thesis and all of this, I was lucky enough to do a Hebrew program so that kids would have a fun way of learning Hebrew. And you know what we did? We did a toothpaste commercial in Hebrew with music and everything. It was amazing.
Brilliant.
And imagine, I could not believe this. We had the whole university TV society filming it for us with cameras and everything because he had it at his disposal. Anyway, so I finished the degree, and then on a Shabbos morning, walking to shul, it was 3/4 of the way through 77, and I'd already had my BA and my DipEd, and I knew I was going to go into education, but out of the blue, Lionel Link lived across the street from us, and he was then the headmaster of the school. And we were walking to shul. I still remember where this was. And he said, "You're finishing your 2 degrees. Have you thought about what you're going to do next year?" And I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "Well, guess what? I'm giving you a job right now. You'll join the Jewish Studies Department, Mariah." And that's how I got the job.
Isn't that unbelievable? Just walking to shul on Shabbos, the good old days. Nowadays, everything is very formal.
I got the job, and I was in the primary department, and then from the primary.
And you weren't married.
I wasn't yet married.
How old are you?
I would have been then 23.
Yeah.
And I started off in the primary department, and then I realized I wanted to be with the younger children to do musical things and drama things with them. So I was very, very lucky. There was an opening in the infant school, and I came down to the infant school. And in those days, I sort of, imagined the big technology that was in those times. I showed Torah stories through film strips. We had music going, and then came what was probably the golden years of Mariah. I made a Friday afternoon show, which was an assembly, using all the teachers to put on like a 10-15 minute skit for the kids so that we'd go home for Shabbos with this great feeling. And I've got kids today who still come to me. One of them, for instance, Janine Levy's brother, he comes to me and he says, "I still remember all those skits. I used to go home and reenact them for my parents."
Aww.
Because I was a big believer in what you learn out of the classroom is more important than what you learn in the classroom. Then 100%. That year, Rabbi, it'll come to me from America, one of the top rabbis of YU came out here to look at the scene if they could start counterpoint here, because they'd already started counterpoint, I think, in South Africa. And they wanted to bring Yiddishkeit in a different way to the high school students. So 1974 was my first year back, and we were heavily involved in B'nai Akiva, and I just started my degree. And I was one of the lucky ones who joined the Madrichim for the first counterpoint. And a lot of people forget this. The first counterpoint was at Shalom College with about 80 or 100 Mariah students and 150 or 200 Mount Scopus students all together
Beautiful.
at New South Wales Uni. So during the summer holidays, they were lucky. And I don't know how they did this logistically. They took over every college, those residential colleges, with all the students. You can imagine what the singing was like at all the meals. And after that, the school allowed me to be the counterpoint coordinator.
For those who are not sure what counterpoint is, correct me if I'm wrong, an extracurricular, informal way of imbuing Jewish values and ethos in a fun, engaging way. That's
right.
It's like camp.
It's a game. And funnily enough, I only found this out afterwards. In 74, I then went on to another degree, going past the Department of Education. And I asked, I was like, icon supervisors, can I do my prac instead of in a classroom, can I do my prac at counterpoint? And they said, you can, but you're going to have to base it on an educational theory. Now, lo and behold, I could not believe this after searching lots and lots of educational books and everything. And in those days, pre-Google, of course, I found something which counterpoint was based on, and it was called a sensitivity training program. Because what they were doing, everything you were learning went to all your senses, and that trained you to be, a good Jew and a good person. So I got to do
I
the
love that.
prac, and every time there was an activity, I would draw, the theory back to the sensitivity training program, and whatever was written in the book, that was exactly what they did at Counterpoint. So following Counterpoint, then I got involved more in the college with different areas. And then what happened out of the blue, and I can still remember where I was standing when I got this phone call. So I'd already been in the school from 77 till I got the phone call in about the year 2000. A most angelic lady rang me, Rose Feckerty, who was the then director of the preschools. And she said, look, I know you aren't in agreement with a lot of the Hebrew programs that are going on at the school because they had just introduced Tal Am, which was a very sort of rigid Hebrew program. And I really didn't agree with it that much. And I didn't really want to teach it. So we have an opening here and we want you to come and give over the Yiddishkeit to the kinder kids. And we want you to be in charge of the Jewish education of our 4 kindies. Actually, no, they had 5 then. Imagine Mariah,
Wow.
5 campuses. So
Unbelievable.
I was standing next to the lady who was in charge of King David, a lady called Sally Heyman. And when she saw my face smile and I told her what I was offered, she looked at me and said, Uncle Velvel, grab it, go. So there started a wonderful, wonderful sort of new career where I was able to really, in a very creative way, give over to these kids and families the lovely Yiddishkeit that we would hope they would keep. And I looked at my role, not only teaching the little kids, teaching the families. So in that time, for instance, one of the things that I enjoyed the most at the Chagin times, we would have cooking demonstrations for the mums.
I love that.
So we would get professional chefs along, maybe sometimes the mothers. We would invite people to somebody's home, so it made it very Hamish. And we had a Shavuot one, a Pesach one, Rosh Hashanah, Hanukkah. And not only did we have top-class food, I would jump in every once in a while and do a little thing called Torah tidbits. And we would blend the cooking with the different halachot. And then at the end, we served wine and everybody dived into the food. And I enjoyed that activity so much because we were sharing with the parents what we were teaching the kids. So I stayed with the preschool probably for more than 20 years. And tell you something, this faculty was on a committee of an Australia-wide ELC group, Early Learning Centre group. A huge group were going to Israel. Myself and Danit and a few other Aussie teachers went along, and imagine we were there 3 weeks, morning to night, visiting schools, and that trip made a very, very big impression. And I know this question might come in, but we'll throw it in now. People want to know, where did the Uncle Velvel sort of, come? It all happened because my wife's aunt, who's one of your typical great synagogue type Jews who would celebrate Pesach and Rosh Hashanah. And as her kids were growing older, they didn't know anything about Pesach. So they knew I was into the music and everything. You record for us on cassette all the Pesach songs. So I made it very entertaining. With the cassette, no music, I'm singing all the songs. Somebody heard it. They said, Uncle Velvet, you got to make us one of those as well. And we were lucky in those days, there were already tape duplicating machines. So I made one more, and then another person gave another person. I said, look, I'm only going to make these if you can't play these on a Seder night, because I know you're going to want me, you're going to want me to entertain you on the Seder night. And they said, we promise we'll learn the songs. And then it dawned on me, having heard, the Uncle Moshe thing in America, I thought, let's do an Uncle Velvel here, and we'll call it the Seder Sing-Along. And that's how the Uncle Velvel came about. We took something which is sort of done in a very sort of black and white way with the Haggadah open, but we thought we'd get musicians in and with boppy music and make it really enjoyable for kids. And that's how we started the whole Uncle Velvel thing. And thanks to my son Gedalia, because imagine those recordings came out first on tape, cassette. Ask a kid today what a cassette is. Then they came out on CDs. And then, thanks to Gedalia, we were able to digitalize them, and now they're all on Spotify. So whoever wants to,
we'll put it in the show notes. We'll link it up.
We'll link it up. And sometimes I get these amazing compliments from different Chabad rabbis around everywhere. They'll put in something in Google. Oh, we're having a Lag BaOmer bonfire, and I need a couple of Lag BaOmer songs. And of course, would jump out with Uncle Velvel, many years ago, Rabbi Akiva, and you can use that.
Unbelievable. I just want to say, talking about that, a fun memory is when I was in kindergarten in Melbourne at Beth Rifke, and we would have little birthday parties, and we would put your birthday one.
Uncle Velvel's birthday party.
Birthday party. It was like a surprise, I remember.
And now it's on Spotify. So
how does it go?
So the beginning of there's footsteps.
Yes.
And I'm coming up the driveway, and I say something like, look at that, it's my birthday, and everybody forgot about it.
Yeah.
I'll have to celebrate my party all by myself. And then the doorbell goes off. I said, wow, I wonder who's in here. And then the door opens, and you surprise, Uncle Velvel, happy birthday. Happy birthday. All the dudes go.
Yes, boys.
Yes,
I remember, and I remember feeling this anticipation. We all knew what was coming because we played every birthday, but we'd get excited, like, and the footsteps, we would be counting down for the celebration.
And it was a really big thrill for me that these songs and little dramatic things were also done by lots and lots of educational institutions, because that was the aim of the music.
Yeah.
To bring Jewish music to the kids. And so we were very successful, and we're very happy we were able to put it on Spotify.
Yeah.
And then I suppose life went on, and Uncle Velvel sort of appeared in thousands of concerts. But you always remember the very first one, and I'll never forget it. Once I had done about 2 recordings, then of course parents wanted for me to do like a live show. And I still remember it. It's sort of diagonally across from where Savion is. There was a big scout hall there. I think it's still there.
Still there.
And the parents decided, let's do a show of Uncle Velvel over there. And in those days, I had pre-recorded music. I had it all ready to go. I did one show, and then 3/4 of the way through the show, one of the mother runs on stage, and I thought, what's happened? What, has there been an accident, something? And she whispers in my ear, listen, do you mind staying on for another 3/4 of an hour? I said, well, what for? And she said, there's another 200 kids outside. We're going to have to make another show. I stayed on, and I just could not believe it. I stayed on, and that's how the first show started. And then I've been very, very lucky. I've traveled around, to lots of different international places to do Uncle Velvel. And we've recorded, and we've still got a few more to put on Spotify. I hope they'll get on. Sort of didn't know whether to keep on going at Mariah, because it's a thing you can't let go of. It really becomes part of your life.
Yeah.
And then you also want to make Aliyah. Hanla told me, look, this year, make it your last year. And actually, funnily enough, I mean, everything is from the heavens and from God. And that year, I got sick. Unfortunately, my mouth cancer. Hashem helped me, and I got over it. And I thought to myself, maybe this is a sign. Maybe I should quit, while I'm on a high. And I found it hard to teach for a long period of time because of my tongue and everything. And then I decided at the end of 23 to finish up, but I would still keep in touch with the teachers and the kids from an educational point of view. So every week I send them messages and inspirations, and even sometimes contests to see if they're reading my emails. And in Israel, I hope to be able to find some lovely schools where I'll be able to volunteer. And some of the old age shows, even though we only did it once, you came along with
My friend Sarah
Fagelin. And that
in Melbourne,
just
we
to
did
tell,
it together.
Just to tell the listeners here, I had been there for Chol Hamoed or something, and then somewhere along the line, somebody told me about you, and so I said, look, let's go down and let's do this Kabbalat Shabbat. And it was one of the most enjoyable Shabbats.
It was. Sarah was playing the piano, I was playing the guitar, and we sang all the songs, and we made all the people so happy.
Earlier this year, we were in Melbourne for Purim. We went for Purim. And I said, whenever I'm down there, I want to come on Purim morning in my costume to Emmy Monash. So I did. And they took me to the Dementia Ward. And the lady there said, look, don't expect much, but they love the music. And I walked in there, and as soon as the music started, and I had this big speaker and everything, their faces lit up. So even though they couldn't talk, but you could see
they were so happy.
The music is going into their brain.
Oh, wow.
And they just love.
I just want to, I have so many things. I feel like we've been on a journey. We've gotten a glimpse of Uncle Velvel. Firstly, you are an icon in Sydney and around the globe. Everyone knows Uncle Velvel. You have inspired and uplifted so many through your songs, through your nature. You just have this love and this light that radiates. You're this jolly, friendly, lovable kind of guy.
Like it says in this book, there's a thought for the day. And always the thought in the back of my mind is every day wake up, and if you are able to do one favor for another person, you fulfilled your whole life mission. So all the more so, if you can bring, a little bit of happiness to another person. So no matter what you do, bring it over in a happy, sort of meaningful way.
I love that.
I think, and it's important. And I've actually found this whenever we had conferences, and I was very particular within the preschool, no matter where we were, I said, before you do anything, even before, for instance, acknowledgement of country and all this stuff, you have to have a thought of Torah and a meditation, and I would like to do it. And I remember I would always get up and I would always tell a inspirational story, but I wouldn't get up there and say, once upon a time, you've got to do it with oomph and feeling and everything. And I remember when I'd get to the end of the story and watch some of the teachers' faces, some of the teachers would come to me up and they'd say, you know what, I don't know what we learned at this conference, but that story you told, I'll remember it for the rest of my life.
Always start with Torah.
And that's why there's a Yiddish expression, when a person comes to you and they ask you, "Du was machst du? How are you?"
Yeah.
And in Yiddish, it's a play on words. You say, "Du macht einen Eindruck." We're making an impression. We want to try to make an impression in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also feel every kindergarten teacher needs to listen, because many kindergarten teachers perhaps are coming in and thinking, what difference am I really making? Half the time changing nappies, for example, playing and watching these kids and, building sandcastles or whatever it may be, reading stories. But these children are little, they're 3, 4. What are they going to remember, and how wrong they are? That they have such an opportunity, like all those little kids, including myself. You impacted me when I was 3 years old. I remember the feeling, I remember the song, the excitement. And I remember listening to also some of your other tapes, because I actually did grow up with tapes, even though apparently they call it Gen Z. But you really do make a difference. And it doesn't matter the age or stage. But I also love for you, this wasn't a job. This was your life's mission.
It was a mission.
It was a mission.
It was such a mission that I would, for instance, wake up, every Monday morning, and I'd think to myself, this week I can be Parashat Lech Lecha. What am I going to do at the end of the week where we can dramatize this? And every day I'd be putting together this puzzle and scribbling down notes. And then what I would do on Thursday, give out all the different parts. You're going to be this, you're going to be this. And it was so exciting for me to watch everybody come in as a team. And even sometimes funny things would happen where people would miss their cue and you got to come in. And when the show would finish and we got to the punchline, I think to myself, the puzzle came together and we fulfilled the lesson that I wanted to teach them today. Of course, not everyone worked, but that was it is a life's mission, because we've got such a big responsibility bringing up a new generation. And I must say, I compare what the children were 20 years ago to today, and I feel for the teachers because of the outside influences and the technology and everything. It's very difficult to get across today, we did in those days.
Yeah.
But I do still believe, even though kids have changed, and I'll give you a typical example, because a lot of poor kids are plonked in front of a TV or an iPad, with the eyes like that. And I've seen this across, you'll call their name, Hannah, and they don't even listen to you because they're so involved in what they're watching. But I still believe when they hear the actual human voice and they see you're trying to give them over something, it makes a big difference.
100%. Are you in a way relieved that you were teaching back in the day and not in this generation? Would you be doing anything different?
Now that is really an incredible question, and I don't want to be selfish, but I would have to admit we were very lucky. For instance, the way we were brought up, running around to parks, going down on billy carts in the street, and having a great time, throwing off firecrackers. Whereas today, all the kids are overprotected, and it's all technology, and
everything's super formal. Even
yeah.
the old age homes nowadays, you can't just walk in. Yeah. You have to sign all these forms and go through all these interviews.
And for instance, my aunt yesterday said to me, Kay at Montefiore Rambouillet, she really wants you to come and perform. So immediately I emailed the lady in charge, and of course, I'm only going to wait till she replies to me. I'm not going to push my way in, but you're 100% right, because instead of me coming in and, there's a gathering of people, I'll have to wait till I get invited, and we have to see if we've got the right time and if it's going to suit. I'm very lucky that I was able to teach in a time where education was simple, and once in a while, you'd show a film, and but today, with all the high tech and everything, even though at ELC level they downgrade that a bit, but I walk into some of the classes and already it's a bit worrying. Already, imagine in a 5-year-old class, I walk into some of the classes and they've got the smart boards and they've got the TV spiel. I walked into one class and had the white smart board, And I said, wow, you're so lucky with smart boards. I said, what's so great about that? You should see the other things we got in the room, the new concoctions.
Yeah.
Just to give you a funny story, and I remember this must have happened in the mid-1980s. At the time, Mr. Nagley, who had come from Mount Scopus in Melbourne to Moriah College, we had the beginning of the year teachers meeting. And at the end of the meeting, he said, teachers, I'm going to keep the best till the end. We've got an amazing high-tech new innovation starting this year. So everybody thought laptops, there was no such thing yet as computers. So everybody was thinking, what's he going to be talking about? So he took this sheet off, and behind him was an actual whiteboard with the texters. And he said, this year, there's no more chalk in Moriah College, no more chalk dust.
Wow.
We are going to be writing on
What
a
high tech.
whiteboard. What high tech. So everybody thought, wow. And you know what? It was a blessing in disguise, because apparently they found out later on,
Yes.
a lot of the teachers that went out and bashed the
wasn't healthy.
dust, it wasn't healthy. All the chalk dust went in. And never, I wouldn't blame it on the school, but never a few people were affected with lung cancer because of the chalk dust.
Aye.
But that was a big thing then.
I mean, you just retired now.
Yeah.
You're now great-grandfather.
But
Baruch
praise the
Hashem,
Lord.
Baruch Hashem. Now you're in a different stage of life. But if you were teaching, would you try as much as possible to go back to the good old days?
Yeah. I would say 3/4 of my teaching, and I just actually gave away all my props to Mariah, I would still stick to the handmade things that I made.
Yeah.
And the gifts that God gave me, namely, my brain and
Yeah.
the talking. But I would always still blend it in with some of the modern technology around. Kids really enjoyed it. And during the Chagim as a treat, I would get a lot of the Chabad programs. In those days, special name. I know there were Hanukkah programs and prom programs, and I would then link it up to the projector, and the kids thought it was fabulous seeing the thing on the wall. And once in a while, but I wouldn't just do it as a babysitting thing for the half an hour. I would, whatever I was showing them, I would explain. If it was a film, I'd stop it. So what's happening and this sort of thing. And I remember as a little kid, I probably got turned on by this happening. We would have been in year 3 or 4, so we would have been about 7, 8 years old. And once in a while, the head teacher from year 6 would take everybody down to the library downstairs. And imagine we would get to watch a 60mm film, those the big films that got.
Yeah.
And there was no sound. You'd watch the film, and then when he'd finish, he'd say, now, boys and girls, we're very, very lucky. We've got time for one more. We'll have one more. And we thought, this is fabulous. And I think if you use the technology the right way,
it enhances.
That's it. It enhances all the different things.
But it can't be a substitute. It can only be an enhancement.
Yeah.
But
I do feel myself lucky that I taught back in those days, because I found there was more of a family foundation then. And I find now it's a different sort of climate in the classroom. Very, very different sort of climate. When Rabbi J.J. Hecht came out, he was speaking at the Jewish House, and he gave a talk about parenting. And if only parents would listen to this, he kept on saying, listen, don't be scared to tell your kid no. You can't have it this time. There will be a time maybe you'll have it. Because if you keep on saying yes, 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 the kids will grow up with no appreciation of everything, and they'll run all over you.
There's no boundaries.
And we're seeing it today, unfortunately.
I'm just veering off from your kindergarten days, but your parents were Holocaust survivors, and I'm sure you grew up with a lot of trauma without even being cognizant of as in, did your parents even share with you their stories?
Thank you so much for asking me that. I think it's a very big part of my life, and in actual fact, I've participated already in a ladies' her name's Sabina, somebody from Melbourne. She actually did a PhD in that actual topic.
Yeah.
And I was one of her interviewees. And I do believe second generation Holocaust survivors have got a unique personality. And of course, one of the things that still stays with me, when you're at a meal and you see the food left on the plate, no matter how full you are, you just can't throw it in the bin. You give it to somebody or finish it, but you can't throw it in the bin. My mother was very forthright when she sort of came in the middle-aged years. I don't know if I told you this before, but when they both met, imagine there was a 20-year gap between my mother and father.
Wow.
So my mother came forward and did tell me a lot about the war. I think she opened up a lot when my Hannah at school, when she had this Project Heritage and all of that, she interviewed her, with cassette and wrote her whole life story, and then I got to hear it. And then when my mother went to a home in Melbourne, and I would stay there over the Shabbos, and she found it very helpful for herself to tell me what.
But this was later on in life. You were already married with children.
They didn't share things with us when we were young. She probably wanted to overprotect us. But my father, even though when he grew old, he hardly shared anything. But as a child, I do recall, and it was very difficult listening to this. My parents' room was in the middle of the house, and my room was like a sunroom, and there were windows there. And I remember vividly, sometimes in the middle of the night, my father having a nightmare of the Nazis, may their names be obliterated, taking away his children, and he would be screaming, and my mother would make him up, Moishe, it's a bad dream, and he'd wake up. And I remember growing up with that, but he didn't talk about it.
He never spoke.
Only later on when we went to Israel, his son, who my children look at as a grandfather, because he was...
It's actually your half-brother.
Half-brother, yeah.
His son is your half-brother,
that's right. He was my half-brother. So he actually did tell me a lot of the stories that my father could have told me, because he was more open about it.
They went through the concentration camps?
So my father and the son, they survived because they said, even though they weren't, they said they were lockmakers. The Germans needed that. And my mother, she was sent to a slave labor camp, and she was making the bullets for the Nazi war machine. And in actual fact, she was in the same town, Chainstakov, where the great Rabbi Meir Yisrael Lamb
Buchenwald.
in Buchenwald. She was there as well.
Wow.
With him. And with my mother, an incredible story happened. I mean, people have got thousands of stories like this. They both came to Sydney in 1949. And in around 1956, she got on a tram in Bondi Beach with a friend.
Yeah.
And they were speaking Yiddish at the back of the tram. In those days, of course, there were trams in Sydney. And the driver of the tram, his name was Klein, Eugene Klein, and he heard the Yiddish down the back. And when my mother came to the front at the stop, it was at the Bondi Beach Public School. That was the closest stop. She was just about to get off the tram, and he called out to her, Malcolm, the biggest Malcolm. And she turned around, she looked. She said, Eugene, I was with you in the slave labor camp. I heard the Yiddish down the back of the train, and it's you.
Oh, wow.
5 years later, they both found each other there on the tram.
Wow.
So I was affected by by all the stories.
So now seeing Australia, I don't want to be negative, but since October 7th, the world has, I don't want to say completely shifted, because I believe that all of these things were always there, but it was underground. It wasn't exposed. The genie was still in the bottle. And I think post October 7th, the genie has been let out of the bottle, where we're seeing people's true colors, and we see the hate that is going on, not only on our streets, but in the whole world's streets, essentially. Do you feel, as a child of Holocaust survivors, are you surprised? How do you feel about everything?
I've thought about this a lot in Israel, and I get embarrassed when people say this to me in Israel. You're from Australia. What's that? And I say, Australia's gone down the drain.
Yeah.
That's why we've come to live in Israel. But I still am, and I believe that there's still the good fair income Aussies are sick and tired of this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
I do believe that the tragedy of October the 7th wasn't just the tragedy of the massacre. There's this massive propaganda thing going around the world, which they want people to believe. But slowly, I do think it's turning around. But I'm very happy, though, that my parents and a lot of the Holocaust survivors aren't alive to see this again, because they got on a boat to go to the furthest place away from this anti-Semitism. And if my parents were to see what was going on here, they just would have started tearing their hair out. This is how it started, and now we're back to where we were. So it's a very, very difficult thing to live through. Very difficult.
Very. Do you feel like, though, it's kind of now that Baruch Hashem, the hostages are back home? I mean, Hamas is still in existence, and we're still going to be in this war. But
I'm a big believer, and that's why whenever I write something on Facebook, I always end it off with this. And I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but we know we read it 2 times a year. There is a commandment to wipe out Amalek, and Hamas is evil, and we have to wipe it all out. We have to finish them off, because it does not matter what. There's no negotiations, as Golda Meir used to say, with them. You have to wipe them out, and you have to give these poor people a chance at starting the whole life again. And my half brother used to always say to me, "You'll never be able to make peace, with the Arab nations, because it's in their blood. All they want to do is destroy us." And it's like a cancer. And until you cut the whole thing out,
it will just continue.
It'll just continue.
Just taking it back to Australia, do you feel like Australia, now that the war is quote unquote officially over, Australia will go back to how it was?
I would like to think it would, but I think a lot of the damage has been done, and the outside influences are still getting in. Who would have thought that the university that I went to, I just couldn't believe this when it was happening, when I went to Sydney University, who would have thought you'd have these lunatics who've got nothing to do all day, and let them go, let them be consistent. There's trouble in the world. Look at all the trouble in the world. Don't go bashing Israel for something that they're not even doing. And unfortunately, you saw a lot of hate going on there. And I'll name and shame them. Whenever something went on at Sydney University, I wrote and complained to the student council, then to the chancellor, then I got onto the ombudsman, and the ombudsman actually rang me back, and not once did they ever admit something was going wrong at the university. They kept on saying, "Oh no, but it's freedom of speech, and we got a letter. Nothing's really gone wrong." But then when they finally did inquiry into what was going on at Sydney University, they finally came to the conclusion things don't look rosy, terrible things are happening over there. And then I wrote back and I said, "Well, what have you got to say about it now that we know what was going on?" They were embarrassed, and they knew that I was right and they were wrong.
I was going to actually say, because you have been a keyboard warrior, I see on social media, you respond to everything, not everything.
I don't like things getting put up without, wait a minute, look at all the facts. What are you talking about? You've
Uncle
got to
Velvel,
let people know.
You're amazing. Listen, I believe sometimes it's not worth engaging, especially for people like me. I'm thank God a mother and doing a lot of other things. I can get very emotionally invested, and it can take up a lot of my time, precious time. Everything in life, something has to give. So for me, in this stage of my life, I just avoid that. And if I have those uncomfortable conversations, I choose to have them also in real life. So I was going to ask, because I see that you're pretty out there on the online world, responding to all of these negative comments and sharing the truth. Have you ever had an uncomfortable conversation in real life? And how did that go?
Try not to engage in those.
Oh,
And some,
interesting.
yeah.
Tell me, why do you...
Well, I don't want to get involved in those, although in the university days, and by the way, this is nothing new. Back in between 72 and 75, there already was a anti-Jewish feeling on a lot of the campuses.
Yes, I've heard that from Michael Danby and Dr. Ron Weiser.
And even in those days, it got to the climax and top when the ABC allowed a group of pro-Palestinian, in those days I don't think they were called pro-Palestinian, students to come on the program, and a few of the orgies, big machas to come on. And unfortunately, because of their scheming and the sneaky ways they give over, facts, the Jewish students in that debate didn't come out that greatly. And you see, the typical fair dinkum Aussie who would have been watching it, oh, well, maybe they've got a point. I do recall at one stage, and it was outside the New South Wales Library, University Library, I did get into a discussion with a Aussie guy, and I tried to give him the facts and give him the resources where to look at, but this guy had already been conned. So I sort of walked away from it. But many times on social media, if I put a comment on, and then something will come back, Velvel Lederman, you don't know what you're talking about and everything, I'll never have another go at it, because I said, I've made my point and that's it.
I love that. Do you suggest to people to engage in dialogue if they feel comfortable and ready enough? Or do you reckon people should just live their lives, don't bother, it doesn't make a difference?
I think it's very important to have that dialogue, because we have to give the other side of the story over, the true side of the story over. So, no matter who you're with, give the story over. I suppose every person has to know where to step down.
Yeah, their limits.
Their limits. And, don't go engaging with somebody who already is completely brainwashed.
Yeah.
That's why. And I take my hat off for him, and I forgot his name when it came to the front in Sydney, the famous Israel influencer who chapped those two ratbag nurses from Bankstown. And he was so clever to bring out what their inner feelings were, but he already had experience of doing that. But I would never get into a situation like that.
Yeah, fair enough. And I feel you have to be up for it as well. And it is confronting.
I would rather spend my time going around doing positive things for people and bringing, positive joy wherever you can, instead of, getting into political argument.
I love that. And I think that was the Lubavitcher Rebbe's approach of adding positivity into the world, increasing in acts of goodness.
Just in case I forget to say this, just had that experience now, where my Chana lives in Karmei Gat. They've got, and so tragically, they've got all the displaced people from kibbutz near Oz in Karmei Gat, and they've given them proper housing and everything, and they come to the big roundabout every day with the yellow flags. Imagine they did this for a year. They have the flags up and the cars drive by and they honk their horns in support of the kibbutzniks. And when it got close, the hostages, thank God, had already come home.
Yeah.
And I had finished on Hoshana Rabbah, that's the 7th day of Sukkot, I'd finished the davening, and I was just about to go home. And I thought to myself, now I'm going to go home. The only person who's going to bless with all of Vanessa now is going to be my wife and the kids and everything. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to go home. I walked out and I saw just to the left of the shul, was about a 1 minute walk. I saw all the kibbutzniks standing there. I said, wait a minute. God sent me here because it's the last time we can mention Little Never. I'm going to go do something positive. I'm going to go down because I could see no Chabadniks were down there. So I'm going to do their job. So I went down with the Lulav and a trog. I put my tallis down and I walked up to each person And of course, I had a yarmulke under my hat just in case somebody there for kippah. And I walked up to people. 80% of the people were overjoyed to say the bracha. I went up to one guy and he looked at me. He said, I've never done this in my life. Can you help me? And I gave him a kippah and he said the bracha. And he knew the brachot because he probably remembered them from school. And then I said, now you're going to say Shechianu. He said, I know about that. And he said the Shechianu. And then he looked at me. I'll never forget this. He said, you know what? I've been saying Shechianu since October the 7th, 2023 for a different reason. And now the Shechianu's happened, but the hostages had come back. And most of them thanked me. And then I quickly rang my wife and she said, I also want to come down. So she came with a wall of an essay down and she got to meet a whole lot of Mexican students who had come down to support the kibbutzniks. And they also got to bench wall and essay for the first time in their life.
Unbelievable.
So minute of positivity and joy can change a person's life.
I couldn't agree with you more. Uncle Velvel, you have imbued with us so much inspiration today. I know that everyone listening is feeling inspired and uplifted. And
thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. And I have to give you a compliment. You do it so well, the way you bring out the questions. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk. I'll just finish off with this inspiration that I heard because it was such a beautiful thought. There was this, I davened in a minyan at the Agnon Shul. We go downstairs at 8 o'clock. And every shul's got the odd sort of a person, and people think they're a bit funny, but you never deep inside them they've got something amazing to share. So there's this older American guy, and he's a Kohen, and he comes up, and you can picture the typical Israelis. He'll get up there and he says the bracha so slowly, Baruch Adonai Hashem, and all the Israelis are going, come on, get on with it already. So this day, he did the service because he had his yahrzeit for his father. But this guy's already in his 80s, and not this older American guy. So when the service finished, he got up spontaneously and he said, I hope you don't mind me just for a few minutes. I want to say a Torah thought on behalf of my father as an elevation to his soul. And the Torah thought he gave was so beautiful. He said, this week in Shul, we're going to be reading Bereshit, the beginning of the Torah, and we're going to be reading the paragraph of Vayichulu that we say for the Kiddush. And in the last verse, it says a very strange thing. It says, Asher bara Elokim la'asot. And in that verse, you got like two tenses. Asher bara, which God created in the past tense, la'asot, which is the construct to do. And the rabbis asked, why are there two tenses in that verse? And he gave this beautiful, beautiful answer. He said, you see, God created the world for us, but he gave it to us. So every day we would make it like the song says, Yoter tov la'asot. We've got to make the world a better place every day. So I hope people that have listened to this story will be inspired. You go out now and make somebody's life a little bit better, a little bit happier. And thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you so much, Uncle Velvel. Wishing you and your family and your beautiful wife, Nechama, and all your children and grandchildren and great-grandchild, only an abundance of revealed brachas, nachas, simchas. Many more simchas. You and Nechama should be running around from simcha to simcha to simcha.
Amen.
In health.
Amen.
In gesund.
Amen.